Hello and welcome to Retrofit Basics. This is Unit 3, Community Engagement. I'm Harriet Sansom from the Centre for Sustainable Energy. We're a charity that has for over 40 years been supporting people and organisations across the UK to tackle the climate emergency and end the suffering caused by cold homes. Retrofit Basics is brought to you by CSE's Futureproof and Communities teams, and it aims to introduce the basics of low carbon retrofit and how people can help progress retrofit activities in their communities. The project is part funded by the UK government through the UK Community Renewal Fund. Retrofit Basics is made up of 3 units. This is Unit 3, where we'll be focusing on community engagement, and hopefully you have watched Unit 1 and Unit 2 already. So in this unit, we'll be looking at understanding your community. What are the different engagement activities you can do in your community to encourage people to engage in retrofit activities? And then briefly, what further training you might look to if you're interested in going into retrofit in more depth. So we'll remember from module 1 that there are a lot of homes in the UK that need to be retrofitted. So this is the challenge. So we have 27 million homes in the UK, roughly, and we'll need to retrofit about 25 million of them. So that's a lot of homes that need retrofitting. And that's why you as a community actor and a community engager are so important. So knowing that the challenge is big, let's think about what your role can be, whether you're a member of a community group or whether you're a local councillor. So when we think about the role that people can play in retrofit, we can think about it starting at the advocate level. So that's where you are advocating to people in your community of the importance of retrofit and how they might go about engaging with it. Then you can move up a step to the advisor. So this is where you're actually giving some more detailed advice about retrofit. So, for example, what measures to choose, how you might go about installing them in your home, what different retrofit assessment options there might be. And then the next level up is what we might call practitioner. So this is actually working in the retrofit sector on delivering retrofit. So an installer or a tradesperson or a retrofit assessor or designer. So this is where you're actually working to deliver the retrofit. And here we're really focusing on the advocate. So engaging with and motivating others in your community to improve the energy efficiency of their homes. So this is where Retrofit Basics is focused at, engaging people who see themselves as being an advocate in their community. And what does that actually mean? What does it mean to engage with and motivate others, and how might you do that? So very broadly, we can think about it as raising awareness of retrofit, answering questions. So we need to get a lot of people engaged. That's the bottom line. We need to get a lot of people thinking about retrofit, being aware of it, seeing opportunities for it. And that's the important role that you can play in your community. Signposting, so making sure that people understand what advice organisations already exist out there, what funding opportunities there might be available. Maybe the local council is running some schemes to install retrofit in particular types of housing. So the advocate can play the role of the signposter, making sure that residents are aware of those opportunities. Normalising retrofit. So this is a really important one. Often we talk to people in their community who want to encourage others to retrofit, and they themselves have often been on a retrofit journey. So they can normalise that process. They can talk to others about their experience. They can also be involved in organising events which showcase to residents the range of different retrofit options that you can think about for your home. So that normalising process is really about shifting values and it's shifting behaviours. It's showing to people that to retrofit your home is a thing that people are doing. It's a normal thing. You can highlight some of the benefits of doing that. So if you think about that engagement process that you're going on, what information will help you to engage and motivate others in your community? So We really say that it's really useful to start by thinking about your community and understanding it. Your community is your audience. They're the people that you're engaging and trying to persuade to engage in retrofit activities. So it's really good to think about the variety of people that you might engage in your community, because different types of people will have different reasons for doing retrofit, different barriers and different motivating factors. So we're going to meet a few different people in an imaginary community. So here we have a family. So they say, we own our home. It's a 1930s mid-terrace house. We're looking to extend our home out the back. And as part of this work, we also want to look at reducing the overall carbon footprint of our home. We've set aside an additional £7,000 for these energy improvements. But we do have a young family which keeps us busy, and we struggle with too much disruption in the rest of our home. So from here, we get an idea of who is the audience. They're a family, they have young children. They do have some money to put aside, but they don't have an enormous budget envelope. They're really interested in how they can reduce the carbon footprint of their home. That's their kind of key motivating factor. But they do have some concerns too in terms of how long disruption will be. Let's meet someone else. This is an older person. He rents his home and he has health issues, which means he says, I need to keep my home warm in the winters, but it's tricky because my home is drafty and my landlord doesn't really want to spend money on making it better. So with this person, it's really good to understand what are their motivating reasons. They need to keep their home warm for health reasons. So it's really about quality of life and how to make themselves more comfortable. But they rent their home, so they don't necessarily have the power to make changes to their home, and they might not have the finances either. So it's good maybe to start thinking about what are some of the regulations that mean that this person's private landlord should be keeping the home up to a certain level of energy efficiency. There might also be funding available for the landlord to make improvements to the home. This person might also want to think about some of the low cost, no cost measures that you can make. If the home is quite drafty, maybe there's some draft proofing that they could do, which would dramatically change how the house feels. Let's meet someone else, another household. So our home, which we own, was built in the 1800s, so it has lots of history. So this is a home which has heritage significance, and it's also likely to be stone walled and be built of kind of more natural materials. But they say it's cold and increasingly expensive to heat. So we'd like to understand what our options are for tackling this, but we don't know who to ask for advice. We've spoken with a few builders to get quotes, but we don't feel they have the experience of working with old homes. So this household is really driven by their energy bills becoming really unaffordable. And it's difficult with an older home because maybe some of the changes that you want to make are a bit more complicated, especially if the home has any kind of heritage significance. So this household is also saying they've spoken to some builders, but they're a bit worried about whether they have good enough experience working with older buildings. So with this household, it's really thinking, first of all, understanding, do they own their home or do they rent it? Maybe there's funding available for them to make improvements to the home, depending on what the household income is. Maybe there are some local builders or tradespeople that really specialise in working on heritage homes, or maybe there's a local energy advice organisation. And then finally, this person says, I own my home. It's a semi-detached house built in 1982. They have about £20,000 that they want to spend on general renovations, and they want their home to look nicer, be more comfortable, and be cheaper to heat. They've done some research, but they now want to speak with a professional. So this person's motivations are really around making the home feel nicer, look nicer, maybe be a bit more modern. They have quite a big chunk of money to spend on it, but now they want to speak to a professional. So they've done some research, they have some knowledge, but now they want to start the retrofit journey. So we can see that these different households have different house types that they live in. They have different tenures, so whether they own or rent from a private landlord or live in social housing. They have different reasons for why they may want to consider retrofit options. And they also have different budget envelopes, so how much money they can spend on improvements. And they also have different degrees of understanding or knowledge about retrofit options. So we're all different, and it helps you to understand what engagement approaches could work well in your community. So understanding these differences helps you engage. It helps you think about what is your way in to engaging with that household? What might be the trigger for that household? Thinking, oh, yes, that's something I could be interested in. Or really understanding what's the key barrier, what's stopping that household think about making changes to their home. And is there any information that you have which could help them with addressing that barrier? So we really recommend just being aware of the different types of people that you might speak to in your community. And now let's think about what could you actually do in your community? What engagement activities could you do to start talking with people? So on this slide, we have different options for kind of giving information. So that can be from a very simple thing to having a poster, which you put up in different places in your community, raising awareness of retrofit measures or an advice website, or maybe you're going to put on a talk and you want to tell people about it. Or maybe there's funding available to support lower income households to make changes to their home. So it's up to you what that poster contains, but it's a good way of giving information to a broad audience. So you might put the poster up in places like the health centre or a local food bank, your church, the local shop, or maybe your community has a notice board and you could put it up there. You might also have a community newsletter. On this slide, there's a brilliant example from Sustainable Overtons. So this is Sustainable Overtons newsletter, and there's information here about where heat is lost in the home, what can be done about it, and who to contact for further information or support. You might have, there might be a community event, and you might want to have a stall where you have free things that you can give, such as maybe a few free light bulbs, or maybe some draft proofing measures on display. And that's again an opportunity for you to talk to people. You might even want to have, for example, a little competition so that a household can win to have a survey done, like a thermal imaging survey. Or you might want to run a talk in your community hall. So you might want to get a retrofit expert to come and chat and answer questions, or you could invite a householder who's done retrofit to their home to give a talk to people who are thinking about making changes. So these are all different ways of giving information to people in your community and starting to talk to them. You might want to run a workshop. So a really good one that we often do is a draft proofing workshop. And we like doing the draft proofing snake workshop. And we have an advice leaflet on our website, which tells you how you may go about doing this. And there are lots of really brilliant examples of community organisations that have done these. For example, York Community Energy have a draft proofing workshop that they actually put online during COVID time. So you can actually find a video of that online. Bristol Energy Network have done brilliant emergency DIY training on draft proofing to really support householders to know how to install basic draft proofing in their homes. So this can be a really nice engagement opportunity. And as I said, we've got advice leaflets on our website, which will talk you through the simple DIY draft proofing measures, as well as how to make a fun draft proofing snake, which you can turn into an engagement workshop. Another one that we like is a slow cooker workshop. So food is a great way to engage people. Someone who comes to a foodie event may not be drawn to an event that's explicitly about energy. Everybody loves to eat. So it's a slow cooker workshop serves as a social opportunity to get people together to come and have a chat and share food. And then whilst that's happening, there's plenty of time to talk about energy more broadly. So we know that slow cookers can be a really energy efficient way of cooking, especially if you have an electric cooker. It'll cost you much less to use a slow cooker, especially at these times. So we've often run these workshops where we'll have one slow cooker that's a prize for someone. So we might have a kind of a raffle or a prize draw at the event. You might also want to have energy advice leaflets at the workshop. And we have loads of energy advice leaflets on our website that you can just freely download and print and use at your own events. So if you are interested in doing a slow cooker event, we have a slow cooker recipe book on our website. We also have guidelines, some basic guidelines for how to run a slow cooker workshop. If you would like some guidelines, please be in touch with us. Another thing you could do is run a Green Open Homes event. So these are events which are where people can visit homes within their community that have made energy efficiency improvements, or maybe they've changed their heating system, and you can go into their home and get a guide from the householder who will answer your questions and tell you about the reality of having retrofit done in the home. And these can be run on different scales, so you might just have 1 or 2 homes in your community, or it might be that there are quite a few households spread across a few neighbouring villages. We all know that people love to be able to go into someone else's home and have a nosy around, so these can prove really, really popular. And CSE actually set up a website, greenopenhomes.net, which you can use to host an event. If you're running an event, you can use our website to put your event on it so that people who want to visit the homes know what homes there are to visit, where they are, what they can expect. On this website, we also have lots of guidance documents for you if you are thinking of running a Green Open Homes event, just to help you think through the different steps of running an event, how you might identify householders, maybe if you need to think about things like insurance. So there's lots of guidance on that website if you do want to think about setting up a Green Open Homes event. Another great engagement activity can be thermal imaging surveys. So these are surveys that I talked briefly about in Unit 1, and they show you where heat is leaking from your home. And some research that was conducted by Plymouth University demonstrated just the power of thermal imaging surveys in encouraging householders to actually improve the energy efficiency of their homes. So where householders are given information and advice about retrofit measures, where that is supplemented with thermal imaging surveys, they're much more likely to actually make the changes to their home. And there's some really good information again on Sustainable Overton's website, all about thermal imaging cameras and surveys. And I really recommend that you have a look on their website for that. It gives you lots of advice about how to go about using them. And also, as I said in Unit 1, often maybe your local council or your local library might have a thermal imaging camera that you can borrow. So it's worth just doing a bit of research to see if that's an option. And the good thing about thermal imaging surveys is that you can do them externally as well as internally. So you might just want to do a walk around in your community with a group of people, and you can compare different houses walking down the street. So you can see where houses, for example, have really good roof or loft insulation, where houses have different levels of wall insulation. Again, it's a very effective engagement tool. And you can then use the results. If you do a thermal imaging survey, it's a good way in which you can then talk to people about, look how much heat is being lost from this home compared to this one. You can hold an event or a talk about it. You can put a post on social media or in your community newsletter, or put a poster up in your village hall. And then, as I talked about in Unit 1, many homes have energy performance certificates. So these are certificates which say how energy efficient a home is, and maybe what measures the home could install to increase the energy performance of the home. They're quite crude, but they're a good starting point in terms of thinking about the energy efficiency of homes. And you can look up on the Find Energy Certificate website as to whether your home has an EPC. You can also actually download the data behind the EPC from this website here, the Open Data Communities website. And if you have the time and the energy, you could download the EPC data for lots of homes in your community. So you start to get a bit of a broader sense of how the energy efficiency of homes in your communities varies. Another way in which you can understand the energy performance of buildings or the carbon emissions associated with different parts of your community is to use some online tools. So I'm just going to talk through a couple of them. One is the impact tool, which is a carbon footprint calculator that CSE developed. And then there's also the place-based carbon calculator, which is carbon.place. With the impact tool, you can look at the overall carbon footprint of your community. And within that, it'll tell you what proportion of your footprint is down to the buildings or the houses within your community. So that's just a good way of getting a sense of what is the overall footprint in your community associated with your houses, and how maybe does that compare to a community close by or to your overall local authority carbon footprint. With the place-based carbon calculator, which is carbon.place, that has mapping functionality embedded within the tool. And you can actually look at, for example, gas and electricity related emissions by output area. So you can see on the slide, there's a map and it's showing you how the emissions associated with gas and electricity vary across these small neighbourhoods. And that can just give you a sense of which parts of your community have more emissions associated with housing. That might be that you want to prioritise effort in those areas. Or you might also be able to get information in terms of how the income varies across your community. And maybe you want to focus efforts on the lower income areas where you can tell them about some of the funding opportunities available to support lower income households. So it's just a way of understanding your community more and shaping the kind of engagement activities that you might take part in. Another great engagement activity that you might want to think about is something that York Community Energy do, which is called housewarming parties. And that's basically where they install an energy efficiency measure in a kind of collective activity. So there's a great blog that they have. If you just search for York Community Energy housewarming parties, you'll be able to read all about it. So they invited an expert into someone's home, facilitated a group session, and then actually together installed the floor insulation into the home. So it's a great way of getting expert advice and then also understanding and experiencing what is the practical process for actually making these changes to our home. Bulk purchasing. So this is less an engagement activity and more a way of facilitating retrofit. So it's through the collective purchasing of things, you can make them cheaper. And you might have heard, for example, of solar streets. So these are in quite a few communities now. Frome, for example, or Farringdon both have solar street programs facilitated through the district council or the local authority. And that's whereby, because lots of householders are coming together to buy solar panels in this situation, it makes the cost of each unit much more affordable. E10 Energy also have a really great collective purchasing buying group. So they have a form that you can fill out online if you want to become a member of their bulk buying group. And their offer currently covers solar PV, solar thermal, new boilers and replacement windows. And they say that through that collective buying process, you can have discounts of between 10 and 20%. So that's a really interesting and potentially really beneficial route to explore. So those are just some ideas of some of the engagement activities that you could do in your community to start to engage residents. You might also be interested in getting further training. So maybe you want to, for example, become a retrofit advisor or an assessor or even a designer. So there are lots of organizations that are already offering really great training programs. So these are just some of the ones that we recommend looking at. So Retrofit Academy, they use the PAS 2030, PAS 2035 framework and the roles within that to train people. The Carbon Co-op runs training, so they have everything from free online webinars, for example, on ventilation or the supply chain, through to more in-depth training. And they also offer a retrofit service themselves. So they have lots of great projects. You can look on their website. The Sustainable Traditional Buildings Alliance, or STBA. So this is an alliance of organisations, and together they also offer lots of great training opportunities, particularly focused around working with traditional buildings, which is so important to make sure that the retrofit activities in those traditional buildings don't negatively impact on the building fabric. The Association of Environmentally Conscious Building, AECB, they run some great webinars and again, more in-depth training. And then the Centre for Alternative Technology, they run everything from webinars to short courses on lots of aspects of eco-refurbishment. So these are just some of the organisations to look to if you're thinking about further training. So that's the final part of Retrofit Basics. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found all 3 of the units really useful, and please be in touch if you'd like to give any feedback or you have any questions. Thank you.